Shalom Aleichem, everyone. Welcome and a Freilichen Live Omer to one and all. Thank you to all of those who are joining on the link. Really wonderful to have you all with us today for a very meaningful experience of Mirza Hashem. I wanted to begin by thanking the sponsors, certainly on our side. Rhonda Weiss, in memory of Chaim Rak, who sadly perished in the tragedy last year, one of the 45 Kedoshim, and Duvi and Rena Maglis for sponsoring as well. Thank you so much for your partnership in making this program happen. Also to add a thank you to Hank High School and my dear, dear friend Rabbi Eli Slemnicki, the principal of Hank High School, for partnering with our shul today and really making what really is, truthfully, a long-lasting partnership and friendship between our shul, Young Israel by Semstead and Hank. Thank you for joining me today, and special to be here together.
It's beyond. This is like, who would have thought? Who would have thought 25 years later to be here together?
I wouldn't.
Neither would I. So maybe, Rabbi, you were going to give a little bit of the meaning and then transition. Okay.
Absolutely. Okay. I want to thank the sponsors first.
Sure. So for Hank High School, I want to thank the sponsors for the whole day here in school, to Fred and Ahuva Cohn, to Ariel and Kira Nurieli, to Sam and Ruchi Kushner. Well, Sam is not really Sam, it's Tzvi. And Moshe and Michal Horowitz, to Aryeh and Shani Hirschberg, and to Scott Matthias. Thank you so much for making all the festivities here today possible, along in part with the learning that Rabbi Galler and I will be doing.
A year ago, I'm sure everyone is aware, but it's kedai to reiterate. About a year ago, exactly last night, there was an unspeakable tragedy that we're all aware of, and in some ways, for many of us, myself included, by the way, it kind of has given Lag BaOmer a different color, although we're going to see in a minute, today really is an uplifting day, a day of meaning, a day of depth, but maybe a different perspective today, based on the tragedy of last year. Those you recall, 45 people were crushed in a very, very sad moment in Jewish history, the worst calamity, as far as I recall, civilian-wise in Eretz Yisrael, and the most painful part about it, I'm sure for the families, of course, it's a very difficult day, and trying to balance the difficulty of it, the Eretz side, with the uplifting spirit of Lag BaOmer, the fire of Lag BaOmer, is probably a very challenging thing. We here together, the Rabbi and I, have decided to try to inject, I would say, some meaning into the day. What that means is that it's impossible to replace what was lost. 45 people who were longing for Kedusha, sanctity, longing for meaning in terms of an experience in Meron, were taken from us tragically, and we could never attempt to fill that incredible void. But we're going to try today to inject some meaning into the day, to recognize their memory and the collective neshama of Klal Yisrael that lost those 45 people who were shoef, who really desired Kedusha, to be inspired, to be sanctified, hopefully give somewhat of nechama on their loss to the collective spirit of Klal Yisrael.
So to begin, and I think this will be a little bit of a challenge, just to balance the flavor of the learning, which is meant in part, as Rabbi Galler was saying, to memorialize as an askara of sorts, but it's still Lag BaOmer. So we'll begin with Perek Mem Hey of Tehillim in some fashion to memorialize the Kedoshim, and then we'll begin learning. So feel free, if you have a Tehillim at home, to recite along with me. Perek Mem Hey in Tehillim, chapter 45. Lamnatzeach al Shoshanim livnei Korach, maskil shir yedidos, Rachash libi davar tov, Omer ani ma'asai lemelech, Lishoni eit sofer mahir. Yaf yafisa mibnei adam, hutzak chen besif sosecha, al ken beirachacha Elohim le'olam. Chagor charbecha al yarech gibor, hodecha v'hadarecha, v'hadarcha tzlach rechav, al dvar emes v'anvat tzedek, v'sorcha noraos yeminecha. Chitzecha shinunim amim tachtecha yiplu, belev oyevei hamelech. Kisacha Elohim olam va'ed, shevet mishur shevet malchusecha. Hafta tzedek, v'tisna resha al kein mishachacha Elohim Elohecha shemen, sason mechaverecha. Mor va'alos kitzios kol bigdosecha, min hechlei shein mini simchucha. Benos malachim biyakiro secha, nitzava shegal limincha bechesem ofir. Shimi vasuri vahati azneich vashichichi ameich uveis avich. V'yisav hamelach yafyeich ki hu Adonayich v'yishtachavu li uvastor b'mincha panayich yichalu ashirei kol kivuda vasmelach penima mimishbeto zav levusha lirikamos Tuval lamelach besulas achareos reoseha muvaos lach tuvalna bismachos vagil tivoena behechal melech tachas avosecha yuvanecha tishisemu lisarim bechol aret azkira shimcha bechol dor vador al kenamim yehoducha laolam vaed. So perhaps as a transition, it was quite noticeable when I was preparing the parak so I could read it fluently. The end of Pasuk Ches, the end of Pasuk Ches, Shemen Sason Mechaberecha, from the well-known Pismon, I think that it's referred to in Sephardic tradition, right? Is from the Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai Zemer, Shemen Sason Mechaberecha, of course, Rashbi, the Yurtzeit of Rashbi, that referring almost like a description of Mashiach, as this parak is referring to. So with that, let's talk a little bit.
By the way, I didn't notice that until you said it and highlighted it. But I could tell you, you're learning in Lila Nishmasam for the Neshamos, and you highlighted the fact that it's Perek Memhe, the 45, the number of people killed, and the learning is for the Neshamos. You know, I like to say every idea maybe is every idea in life is God sent. This one maybe Emir Hashem hopefully is definitely God sent. So thank you.
Okay, so like we had to learn something. Like thoughts, Rabbi.
What were you thinking? Tell me your thoughts about what came to mind.
So initially I thought like a little bit of Lag BaOmer, Torah, Kabbalah, Hasidus, but that's well beyond my capabilities.
And mine, don't worry, and mine.
So that's I think the traditional approach. You know, a little bit we were talking about, you know, the chevra who go to Meron, parenthetically. You know, you remember we used to teach in Westchester High School together.
We started together, right?
Yeah,
right.
And we worked with a wonderful woman there, Dr. Nancy Block,
Of course.
whose brother is the Biana Rebbe,
Sure.
who has the kavod of lighting the Medura at Meron every year. He has that kavod. I don't know, I was brought back to that. And so we were thinking a little bit, so you had mentioned, you know, that people are going to a specific place, right? They're going to Meron to look for Kedusha. And then you'd also mentioned that they don't just go to Meron every day of the year, although there are people who, you know, who visit Meron, but they're going during a specific Zman. They're going during a specific time. So perhaps to try to unpack, like what is that? The search for Kedusha through space, through Makom, through Zman, through time, perhaps is a framework through which we could like learn a little bit.
Sure.
So
Teach me.
Okay. So, you know, one of the pieces of Torah that relates to this time of year, Sfira, which has a difficult meaning, because some people think Sfira means like, you know, Minhage Avelus, and some people refer to it to the, you know, the mitzvah d'oraisa of counting, a mitzvah d'Rabbanan, machlokas, whatever it may be. There is something I always think about, which is from the Psukim, which we just read a week or so ago, depending where you lived, from Parshas Emor, Perek Chav Gimel Pasuk, Psukim, Tesvav and Tezayin, Usfartem lachem imacharas haShabbos, Yom Aviachem es Omer Atnufa, Sheva Shabbosos Timot Tiena. The mitzvah Usfartem lachem we should count from the day after Shabbos. The day after from the day that you brought, or the day after you brought that korban, Sheva Shabbosos Timimos Tiena, 7 complete weeks. The next pasuk says, Ad mimacharas haShabbos hashviyas tisperu chamishim yom, until the day after that 7th week, tisperu chamishim yom. You should count 50 days. Ve'krafta mincha chadash al Hashem, and then you bring that special korban, that new korban, if you will, on that day. So I recall when we were back in Westchester, I recall identifying then a stira in the psukim. There's a stira. And that stira is quite obvious when you just look at the psukim. Usvartim lachem. Amen. So that stira is actually quite obvious, right? It says Sheva Shabbosos Timimos, 7 complete weeks. You took high school math. That equals.
Right.
So that's 49. That's 49, in case you didn't know. And tisperu chamishim yom, which is a directive. Tisperu chamishim yom. You should count 50 days. So which one is it? Is it 50 or is it 49? This is a well-known machlokas, well-known stira. Although I didn't know it.
Chazal and the Gemara pick up on also, right?
Right. So Rashi here, in an amazing comment, he tries to resolve, and it's not really readily apparent that he's trying to resolve the stira, the contradiction in Psukim. The Dibra Maschil says, Ad mimacharas haShabbos haShviyis tisperu, v'lo ad bichlal, v'hein arboyim v'tisha yom. It's saying, Rashi's saying, that you only count 49 days, specifically. Ad mimacharas haShabbos haShviyis tisperu. Now what's fascinating here is if you look at the Tamei HaMikra, the trup, there's an esnachta, there's a stopping point. Sorry, not an esnachta. There's a zakev katon, I think it's called, on top of the word hashviyas, which means you should pause. The clause ends, Ani macharas hashabas hashviyas, pause. That's what you should count, 49 days. And then it's tisperuch. There's dibur amaschil, in what the newer versions, if you will, have it as bolded. The clause reads, Ad macharas hashabas hashviyas tisperu. It's almost like Rashi has different ta'amei hamikra on the pasuk, which is fascinating.
I just saw Rashi yesterday, the same thing. Rashi Ramban, we always underestimate how much they focus on breaking up psukim. Whether parts are connected, disjointed, I always find it fascinating.
And you see it even further. Chamishim Yom is the next Dibra Maschil. V'hikrafta mincha chadash al Hashem. He reads it, Chamishim Yom, on day V'hikrafta mincha chadash al Hashem. You bring the korban. He doesn't read it, Tispiru Chamishim Yom, the way we have the Tamei HaMikra. But rather he breaks up the clauses, which seem, and that's exactly what Rashi says, B'yom hachamishim takrivuha. On day 50, you shall bring that korban. And Rashi seemingly is resolving the steer in the psukim by perhaps, I'm not an expert in kind of Rashi, and
Yes, you were. Yes, you were.
but by maybe having a different Masorah in the different Tamei, having a different Masorah for the Tamei HaMikra. Perhaps that's what Rashi is trying to say here in his breaking up of the Diburei HaMaschil. That's pretty novel. And indeed, there are other approaches of how to resolve the stira. One of them is through a rush of the Torah just rounding up. You have that in many places in the Torah. You have it with the census. Everything would basically ended in 0 except for a couple of deviant cases. You have it in Arba'im Yakenu, which really we know with Malchus it's only 39, so what is it, 40? So then you have B'shivim Nefesh Yardu Mitzrayma. Rashi famously, right, was only 69 when born between Achomos, but the Torah says Shivim, so they round it up. So maybe that's the pshat here. If you were to read it the way we have it, Tisbru Chamishim Yom, it doesn't mean Chamishim Yom, it's just rounding up. Maybe. I recall years ago, one of our colleagues, Rabbi Greenberg from the Young Israel of White Plains, I asked him this question.
He's like,
and he pointed me to a Maharal, with Vachamushim alu b'nei Yisrael. Vachamushim back in Shemos.
Harry Tizvav, right?
Oh my gosh, let's see.
You're down or Tizvav?
Something like that. Vayasev Elohim esa'am derech hamidbar yamsuf vachamushim alu b'nei Yisrael me'eretz Mitzrayim. That Bnei Yisrael went up, Alu Bnei Yisrael, as Chamushim. And Rashi there struggles with what does Chamushim mean.
1/5.
Exactly, or Klezat, Mizuyanim.
Right.
But the Maharal, I think picking up on the fact that it's written Chaser, right, which allows her to be read as both Chamushim and perhaps as Chamishim, that they went up with Chamishim, meaning with 50, with this notion of 50. The Maharal was known to give symbolism to numbers. 7 is natural, 8 is supernatural. And perhaps al derech drush, the way to resolve the stira in the psukim is to say something like the following: is that 850 is like the paradigmatic, the ultimate 8. 8 is supernatural. Where we have Bris Milah on the 8th day. We have Chanukah's 8th day with the miracle, supernatural. Perhaps even Simchas Torah, which is the 8th day of the 7 days of Sukkot. But 50 is like the ultimate one, because it's 7 times 7, nature times nature, and the next day is 50. So the Maharal, perhaps, could be understood, or we could use this Maharal, this idea, to understand that 50 perhaps represents like the ultimate supernatural, which could mean something like the following: a goal, an idea, beyond us that we're expected to do, but that we can't actually understand or maybe even actually do. What would be examples of 50 in the Torah? Yovel would be a classic example. What would be another example of 50? Another example of 50 might be when the Torah was given, right, on day 50. That's what we're talking about here a little bit with Shavuos. And these would be things that we're expected to do, Yovel. The Torah, we're expected to learn Kol HaTorah Kula. We can't actually do it. Or in the case of Yovel, right, where you have to have 2 years of Shemitah, this is a Shemitah year, but imagine next year also
it's
being
beyond our reach, right?
Yeah,
Right.
we're expected to do it, but we can't actually understand it. So just trying to be a little bit concise here. Perhaps a way to resolve this stira is to say something like the following: is to say something like Sheva Shabbosos Timimos is what you count, 49,
Right.
but the goal is 50. Tisperu Chamishim Yom. The goal is to count 50, even though one can't do it or understand it, like in the case of Yovel, but that's still the goal. Kind of like the Mishnah in Avos. The Mishnah in Avos, Lo alecha hamlacha ligmor v'lo ata ben chorin libatel mimena.
The balance of, like, on one hand, you can't do it, we recognize that, it's like a little empathetic of the Torah. On the other hand, we say, you should try.
Exactly. It's like, many of us struggle, I struggle with the idea that, like, I'm expected to learn all of the Torah, like it's just not realistic, and it become demoralizing. Like, I know I'm not going to do it, so why should I?
Don't get down.
So why should I do it? But yet, that's the goal. Lo alecha hamlacha ligmor, but v'lo ata ben chorin libatel mimena. You can't give up, even if you know that you may not finish the job. So perhaps that resolves the stira and the psukim. This is something I think about, every year. I happen to like this idea because it's an idea of zman, about what do we do with our time, right? How do we access time? How do we think about time relative to our own abilities, relative to our own talents, skills, especially when we know how many what the demands on our lives.
Can I play rabbi for 1 second?
Yeah, please.
Just as a rabbi, I think Rabbi Lamb called it the unrepentant darshan, that rabbis always look for. Right? So if you take that approach, the beautiful idea, you can say v'chanushim alu, that even though we think it's beyond us, Hakadosh Baruch Hu, we left Mitzrayim, somehow planted in us the ability to have the chamishim. We think it's beyond our reach, but the Torah is telling us v'chamishim alu, that realize that even though you find it difficult, whether it's Yovel, whatever the case may be, whether it's Har Sinai, I've given you the kelim to do that. It's just my drasha.
I mean, that was at the genesis of the Jewish people, meaning part of becoming the
beginning,
Jewish
right.
people is to say this is who you are as you get to even the lack of goal, right? You're getting to that
Right.
goal that you can't get to, but this is who you are. This is who you are. You have it in you to so to speak, not get there,
Right.
but get there. Yeah.
I told you this story ever. I'm sure you heard it, but he said it so many times. Dr. Pelkovitz, the psychologist, he always tells this story, but I tell it to my students and the shul all the time because it's like a story that defines life. He was talking about once after the tsunami in, where was that? That was in Indonesia.
Okay.
Indonesia, right? I think it was Indonesia. And there was a doctor who fled from the tsunami, and he went to a hilltop, and he's watching as his village is, you know the story?
I'm remembering it as you're telling me.
It's familiar, right? I tell it a lot. It's just such a good, it's like a yesod, a fundamental idea. He's watching as his village is like swept away by waves, and he's despondent because he feels like I can't save anybody. Look, I didn't do enough. I saved one person, 2 people, and he's just like almost like if you could freeze him in a moment, he's thinking, should I go back down, not go back down, save more people? And he recalls something his 3rd grade teacher had taught him. His 3rd grade teacher said to him,
Not Mrs. Itzkutz.
not our 3rd grade teacher, so she was great. And she still has the same, I give a shiur Wednesday morning, so she still has the same, it's amazing, shout out to Ms. Itzkowitz, still has the same messages and lessons. She always says to me at the end of the shiur, thank you, Rabbi, have a wonderful day, and many of them. And this past Wednesday morning, I was giving the shiur, and it got quiet when I summarized the shiur. I said, Ms. Itzkowitz, I'm waiting for the message. Amazing. So this doctor's 3rd grade teacher told the class, said, when something's hard, you have to try really hard. When something's impossible, just try harder. And entered his mind, he ran back down the mountain to save like 4 or 5 more people. I mean, impossible, we think of the word impossible as like, I can't do it. Gotta try a little harder. That was the message of the story. I never forgot that Misa.
Beautiful. So, yeah, this is what I was thinking about, just as we had kind of briefly, I don't know.
Beautiful, beautiful. I'm going to share a little Torah with you also. I brought my Svarim, if you don't mind. I'm a safer guy.
You brought one for each.
I brought
Okay.
one for each.
So you're Baal Chesed, and I was just thinking about myself. Okay, well, that's fine. That's fine.
It's okay. We don't keep score here. We don't keep score here. But so you were speaking beautifully about the idea of time, and
Just tell me where you're going.
Just
Just tell me you're going. Where?
Daf
Just,
Chaf Aleph on the base in Tainus.
okay.
I think I put the little string there.
Okay.
It's in it. Pull the string. Yeah. See?
We're not keeping score, but that's a double chesed.
It's a chesed. Yeah, right. And notice, I could have given you the Gemara without the string.
And you give me the nicer, newer
The
one.
nicer, right. He's such a Baal Chesed to me, I want to pay it back a little bit. So many years. So you were thinking about time. It was important, the first thing that enters your mind, you were thinking about time. I was thinking about space, like the place. These 45 amazing, mostly young men were going to a place, Meron, where Rashbi is memorialized, and they wanted to gain Kedusha from the Makom. So this Gemara kind of jumped out at me. So let's learn the Gemara together. Maybe we'll kind of come out with a message also. Let's start from where it says here. Perfect. Second line, first word. Drokeres. Ir hamotzia chamish mios ragle havi. So this city, this like small town, or city, something like that, called Drokeres. It was a city that they sent out 500 infantry, like soldiers, from the city. Yatz mimenu shlosha mesim biyom echad. So this is like, this sugya in Tainus, by the way, famously, we don't learn this Gemara often, but like, and it's antiquated because we don't do this today, but remember, like in the olden days, they used to like declare a fast for every calamity. So, lo alinu, God forbid, we had something like the Meron tragedy, they probably would have been gozer a fast for 3 days for, I don't know, all of Eretz Yisrael. They don't do that anymore.
Right. I think, I remember maybe one of the years I was in Israel learning, it was like terrible droughts, and they do have tefillos, I think.
I mean, they take the tefillos of the Yom Tzar, they're ready.
I think I vaguely remember that as possible.
And they gather?
I don't know. Like, they don't go out into the market, what I'm saying,
Right, like they
with
do,
the wagons
right.
and then bring out the Torah. That,
Right,
I don't think they do that.
Like Sheni the Chamishi,
Right.
Exactly. So there 3 people died of these soldiers on one day. So Gazer of Nachman bar Rav Chisda Tanisa. Rav Nachman bar Rav Chisda, he decreed a fast day, as they would back in the day when they had 3 people died in one day. Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak Kiman. So Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak says, and this is the brilliance of Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak. He says, "Oh, what's your source for that? And I understand the Gemara is talking about when you declare a fast, when you don't declare a fast, but where do you get the idea from to declare a fast for this particular tragedy?" Kirav Meir. Da'amar richek nigichosav chayev kir b'gichosav lo kol shekin. Rav Meir had said, this is a well-known idea, Baba Kama, that when an ox gores for 3 days in a row, that's considered a shor muad. It's like, the first week in Yeshiva and Nashon Muzikin, right? Like, it was Baba Kama, KBY, they learned KBY.
We learned Gittin, but I remember they started talking about shtaros. I was like, I never really heard that word shtar before.
we heard it like sukkah.
Yeah.
Sukkah Yeshana,
Brachos,
Gazel,
Psachim,
Brachos, right.
Beitza we
The
learned.
world of like
Yeah.
Nashon Muzikin, the different world,
Yeah.
different world. Although Kiddushin we did, but only the part
The mitzvah sav alabein, mitzvah ben alav.
right, but we didn't do the real Kiddushin, like, given the shtar.
Exactly.
They wouldn't teach that to high school, right? The average high school, the first
They
paragraph.
were smarter than that.
Right. They didn't trust us. So the svara was that if an ox gored 3 days in a row, that's a shor muad. That's considered to be a dangerous animal and has a different status in terms of monetary, right? But the svara of Meir had was, well, if we're going to say that when it happens 3 days in a row, let's say it gored 3 times in one day. So lo kol shekin. In other words, we only have the case in the Mishnah about 3 days in a row. But obviously, if it's a more severe case, it gored 3 times in one day, kol shekin. Of course, that's also a shor muad.
I mean, it's demonstrating even more aggression.
Exactly. So, and by the way, it's funny.
So how is this a source?
Oh, so not yet. So
Okay.
You're always ahead of us. You're always ahead of us. When I was in my first year in Rabbi Simon Shir in YU. So I remember we're learning about, it was Sukkot time, we're learning about Mashiv Baruch. In Yeshiva, you sing the song, Mechaye Mesema. Remember that song?
No, but our mutually very good friend, who may be watching, Dr. Michael Atlas.
Oh, beautiful.
We often spend Sukkot, whatever,
Right.
together. So him and Rabbi Jensen made Aliyah recently from Great Neck Synagogue. They sing that at their Yontif table.
I love it.
Yeah. So I've had the opportunity to sing it with them.
It's not just a song, you know that, right?
It's
There's
a
svara.
halacha. It's a halacha.
Right.
You know,
So the Prisha or the Drisha, I forget who exactly, basically says that when the tour writes that people, Maharam Rutenberg says you should sing it 30 times in a row, because if you forget Mashiva Rak,
30 or 90?
well, you sing this.
It's 30 days is the halacha, which.
Oh, you're right.
Right.
You're right. Rabbi, you
Yeah.
always got ahead of me, right? So 30 times 3, right?
Right, but it's really more than 30 times 3, right? Because of Musaf and Shabbos and Rosh Chodesh. So that's the cheshbonos that like some of the, I think, the Achronim make.
The memory isn't that good.
Yeah.
You gotta remind me a little bit. But that's what the tour writes, Maharam Rutenberg, and the Prisha there says, where do you get that from? From this brisa. From this brisa. That what? If I say for 30 straight days, Mashiv HaRuach, right, and I'm now muchzak, that if I forget it 2 months later, I don't have to go back because I'm muchzak to say it. So, lo kol shekain, if I say it now in one day,
Right.
30 times or 90 times, and that's why in the shivas they do it, for that
Yeah.
rationale.
I wonder
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, that is, first of all, it's amazing. This is the source, that's cool.
Yeah.
But like, I wonder, la halacha, do people actually, if they're then besuffic, whether they said Mashiv HaRuach and B'nai Geshem the week after, whatever it is, do they not repeat Shmoneh Esrei?
So I'm going to give you homework.
Yeah.
Because on that Prisha, who says this is the source, the Drisha, basically upshlag, and I can't recall what he said, but he basically tries to prove that this brisa of Rav Meir would not apply to Mashiv HaRuach. But you have to look there and see why.
Right.
So I'll give you homework for afterwards.
Right, but it sounds like la halacha, we don't really rely on it. I think it's more like
It's a nice
shtiklach.
idea. I think this is take it very seriously. I remember, like, I was sitting upstate in Albany for some kind of story by Simon Shir. I went to Albany one year in Schenectady, New York.
That's where, apparently, if Alyssa, if you're watching, my father-in-law was the Rav of the shul in Schenectady for 5 years. We even went back to visit her home because the rabbi still lives there. My father was a rabbi. Yeah, so we know Schenectady. I actually visited and davened in the shul there once.
It snows there in August, I think. It's like,
Could be, yeah, but it's actually very nice.
It's beautiful.
It's very nice.
Beautiful. But I remember we were there, and one of the guys, an older guy than me, I was like the first or second year yeshiva, but I remember, third year? Might have been, I definitely was not in Smicha yet. I was just starting Smicha. One of the older guys who went, he wasn't just singing like a song, he was actually focusing like Slavos with passion, and having kavanah, like l'shem mashiv haruach, shuffling back and forth. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I thought he had kavanah for the actual halacha that it worked.
Okay.
Yeah, so let's do the Gemara. So,
We're still looking for the source, that,
oh, nothing yet. So
what are you looking for? Just remind us.
Looking for the source that basically that a makom is imbued with kedusha not because of the makom, but because of the people that are there.
Okay.
In other words, so remember, the story was that Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak said, I have a source for you that you were gozer at Tainus. You made a fast day because they lost 3 people in one day. We know if it was 3 days in a row for sure, so kol shekin. So now he says in the following, he says, it's Bar Chista, Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak, Li kumar lisi ligaban. He says, you're a genius. Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak, you're a genius, come live by us. I would love to have you as a Rav in our community. Beautiful. It's nice recruitment, by the way. But how good would you feel if you spoke somewhere, right? And someone said, hey, Rabbi Gal, Rabbi Stimnik, I got to tell you, I heard you yesterday. What will it take to get you here? It doesn't happen in real life, right? In real life. Halavai, right? All right. And whatever you want, I'll give you. Well, what's it going to take, Rabbi Stimnik? What's it going to take? Come live by us. Amar le tanin Rabbi Yossi, Omer lo makomo shel adam mechabdo, ela adam mechabed es makomo. That it's not the place that gives kedusha; it's the person that gives kedusha. In other words, and what's the source for that? Matzinu b'har Sinai shekol zman shashchina shruya alav amra Torah gamatzon v'habakar al yiru mul harahu. Okay, that the Torah commands that nothing, nobody, no animal should approach the mountain, this Har Sinai, by the giving of the Torah. Nistalka
As long
Hashchina.
as the Shechina was there.
Exactly.
Right.
But Nistalka Hashchina Mimenu, Amar Torah b'mshoch hayovel, hema yalu bahar. When they sound the shofar at the end of Har Sinai, which was the signal it was over, then you can run up the mountain as long as you want.
Right.
Stay there, hang out there, wonderful, right? So what does that show you? It shows you that it's the Shekhinah is there, and the Shekhinah left, it's just a place. It's the people that, the rayas from the Shekhinah. The Shekhinah is there, there's Kedusha. The Shekhinah left, it's just a place.
There probably are exceptions to that rule.
There's gotta be. I mean, halachically, it's funny, during COVID, one of the questions they raised, like a Kilmer, that's how would raise this question. Like, if you have your backyard, and you make it into a shul, you put like a, a thing there with Aron Kodesh, so he said, like, I would wonder if you're allowed to play ball there anymore. You wouldn't be, right?
These are the Mishnayos, I think, in Megillah, right, which
Yeah,
talk
yeah.
about the status of the area of shuls, even if they're kind of destroyed. What can you do with them? What can't you do with them?
Right.
Can you use them as like a warehouse type thing?
Correct.
So there's, it seems that even if they're defunct, so to speak, at some level, they retain some elements of
Correct.
kedusha. But perhaps because the Shekhinah is still shruya there.
It's there. Unless they were built outside, they're made on
Right.
condition to only here for now, but when we're ready to take them apart, that's, right.
That's a good question, though. Can we use your backyard to play ball?
It's a great question.
Yeah.
I'll tell you another great question.
Yeah.
Somebody asked me this question, a real question. They bought as a Aron Kodesh, they went to Home Depot to buy a closet. One of those like, small little armoires.
Yeah.
And
I davened in a shul in Great Neck, a Sephardi shul. They just repurposed a like a piece of furniture, and that's the Aron Kodesh that they use.
right, so the question was, so let's say they decide, someone donates a beautiful Aron Kodesh. And now what do you do with the, can you take it back to your house to put your shirts and ties in it? That's a serious question. Right?
Yeah.
I doubt it.
Yeah,
I doubt it.
l'chora not.
Right.
Just because it was made as a
But Tashmishe Kedusha, Nignosim. In other words, unless it's Al Tanai, Tashmishe Mitzvah, Nizrakim. Your Lulav, your Esrog can go,
Right.
but Tashmishe Kedusha, if it's
That's
if
the
it serves
Sugis
the Sefer
Megillah.
Torah,
That's
exactly.
the Sugis
That's the
Megillah.
Megillah, exactly. So that's the first raya, that it's not the place, it's the people that are there. And then the Gemara says, "V'chein mansinu ba'ohel moed." Same thing by the Mishkan. Midbar in the Midbar. Shekol zman shu natoy. As long as the Mishkan was, kind of put together, assembled. Thanks for the word. Excellent word. Amar Torah v'yishalchu min hamachana kol tzarua b'kol zav. That's the pasuk. B'kol tamei l'nafesh. That's the whole pasuk there. So you had to send everyone who was, suffering from a tumah issue, right? So they couldn't be there because there was kedusha there. But huglulu haparov. Once they rolled up the walls, the hanging walls of the Mishkan, hutru zavin hamutzarayin likanes sham. Then they could go there, right? And the Gemara, that's the second raya, basically, that when the people or the Shekhinah is there, then there's kedusha. But once the Mishkan is rolled up, there's no longer the Shekhinah. The Zav can go, Masorah can go, wherever it was.
Meaning wherever place that the Mishkan was erected, that
Right.
place now loses its status of being the Mishkan.
Correct. I want to point out, by the way, and this is not, we're not going to see it maybe together now, but just, it's Kedai, just Rashi here. And not just Rashi, I think others also. I saw in the Achronim, Rashi of the Rishonim, but I think even the Achronim, the Avitz I saw in the Sifta deck, I love the Sifta, raises the question, if you notice the Psukim by the first proof, by Matan Torah, the Psukim they use are ones from Luchos Rishonos, and one's from Luchos Shnios. So Rashi wants to know, why would they combine, each one had the same law, so why not combine the right set together? Why are they mixing? Why is the Gemara mixing and matching two psukim? So I don't think we have time for that Rashi. I don't think we have time for
I
that
don't know
Rashi.
what time it is. Matt, what time is it?
46. Okay, we have time for that Rashi. Okay. It'll be we'll see part of the Rashi maybe. If we see the Rashi for 1 second,
Sure.
I think it's Divrei Hamaschil El Mul Haharahu.
I see it.
You see, there's like an afal gav, like 1, 2, 3, 4 lines down in that Rashi.
Yep, I see it.
V'afal gav dehaikra beluchos harishonos. Even though that first pasuk is by the first luchos, lo nistalka shchina al luchos ha'achronos shenisnu b'yom kippurim. Amazing. So Rashi says the reason why they combine them is for a lesson. It's a message actually that the shchina never left. The first luchos, the shchina was there. What we think in my world when I grew up, the luchos are broken. What happens? We start over. amazing. Rashi says you don't start over. The Shekhinah never left Har Sinai. It was almost waiting for us to come back for Luchos Shnios, the second set of Luchos. Luchos Achronos, Shenisku B'Yom HaKippurim. Right? And we can stop there in Rashi, but I thought that was fascinating, that idea that I never, if not for Rashi, I never would have noticed that idea, that the mixing and matching, that's the idea that it was all one package, and furthers the idea, by the way, that both sets of Luchos were really one package. But here was my thought. I want to hear your pshat in this. The Gemara is trying to prove that it's not the place that has kedusha; it's the people that are there. Because Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak is invited to come. He's like, you don't need me, right? I leave. It's not gonna. It's about. You can be there, get kedusha, and the proof is from the Shechina by Ma'amad Har Sinai, Matan Torah, and by the Mishkan. It's such an obvious question. We're trying to prove that a makom is affected by the people who are there. And what's the proof? 2 cases where the Shechina comes. How could you learn about people giving and viewing kedusha to a makom from 2 cases that are outliers? A person giving kedusha to a place?
To Hashem bringing
To Hashem. So I was struck by that. So I want to hear you, before I share my thought, I want to hear your thought. And you're probably going to say the same thing I'm going to say, but I'm going to
It's a big honor that you think that I would.
I know you did, right.
I know we're at the end, but
Me.
So, just a thought is, perhaps it's when the Shekhinah comes down to the place that creates an opportunity for people to try and access that, such that their attempt to accessing the Shekhinah, which is in that place, the attempt of access is what brings the Kedusha to the place.
Beautiful. That's actually amazing. I was thinking something a little different. That's awesome. I mean, the Shekhinah really is the word latent appropriate? Latently always there, ready to be used, and when a person comes, they kind of draw it out the access.
Like imagine a world where Hashem came, so to speak, came to Har Sinai, but Moshe or whomever, right, didn't try and access whatever was being offered there. Hypothetically, would that makom still have kedusha? In that very kind of like
because it wasn't unlocked.
It wasn't even attempted to be accessed.
Right. And by the way, you could leave with the thought that it's a good reminder to all of us that every makom has kedusha waiting to be drawn out. We have to that. Our job in life, our role in life as a Jew is to kind of draw it out.
No, and that's the pshat in the Gemara. It's not the place that brings, but it's the people who are machabed, the people who attempt to bring kavod, or attempt to bring whatever.
Only because I know your father went. My father went to Lubavitch, and your father went to Lubavitch, and so we have Lubavitcher connection. Okay. So you ever heard the story of the Rebbe, Lubavitcher Rebbe?
Well, the story is very.
I mean, the story about the Rav Nachman of Breslov and the Lubavitcher Rebbe. So 2 Hasidim go to Gehenna. You know the story?
No.
2 Hasidim go to Gehenna, and one's a Breslover Chassid, one is a Lubavitcher Chassid, and they start crying out to the Rebbe to save them. So the Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak. It's the Gemara. Rabbi Nachman of Breslov, sorry. Rabbi Nachman, the same thing.
The Breslover Chassid.
The Breslover Chassid is crying out to the Rebbe, and Rabbi Nachman hears the cries, and he says, my entire Chassid, my dear Chassid, raise your payas. And they have long taltalim, and I can pull you out of Gehenna. He raises his payas, and Rabbi Nachman pulls him out of Gehenna. Then the Lubavitcher Chassid starts to cry, I need my Rebbe, I'm in near Gehenna, it's not good. So the Rebbe comes to him, and he says, Rebbe, no, save me, save me, save me. The Rebbe goes into his pocket, takes out $1, and says, here, make Gehenna Malcham Kedusha. Isn't that a great story?
Yeah.
That was the philosophy of Chabad, right? The Lubavitcher Rebbe said, this is Gehenna because you're calling it Gehenna, but you can make whatever you want. Isn't that a beautiful...
Yeah.
It's a Bavus Maisa. I don't speak Yiddish, as you know, but it's a Bavus Maisa, well-known...
Not for now, but that's like this well-documented story. I was just reminded of it because I was driving somewhere in Brooklyn, and it's called the Shirley Chisholm Parkway or something, that the Rebbe inspired Shirley Chisholm, the assemblywoman or whatever it may be, to be Makadesh, a situation that was totally she viewed as totally devoid of opportunity to be Mekadesh. It's a great story. You can look it up. Just Google Shirley Chisholm and Lubavitcher Rebbe.
I lived in New York my entire life, never heard of that area.
Amazing, amazing story.
Really?
But the same Yesod.
It's good for a drush.
I use it all the time.
Okay.
And yeah, hopefully I didn't give away too much because I use it all the time.
But the point what I was thinking about, the answer, and beautiful answer you shared, I was thinking that here you have 45 people amongst thousands and thousands of others who came to, like you said, draw from the Kedusha of Meron, but also imbue Kedusha to Meron. I think, and combining what you have said before, you're learning about the idea of time. Certain times are misugal, are really most appropriate kalpei shmaya in the world of God, in God's metaphysical world, to draw more Kedusha. Certainly Lag BaOmer is one of those days. And here you have 45 people who are going to a makom, a place, at a certain time, trying to get that Kedusha, and on the different side of the coin, really imbue Kedusha to that makom. And that I think really crystallizes the loss of these 45, because it's not, like the Gemara said, it's not of course Meron is a sacred place because of Rashbi and but it's the people that go there that really imbue it with Kedusha. I think that's what the message I took from the Gemara was.
Beautiful. Their attempt to kind of be united, and whatever their avodas Hashem is there, whatever the davening, the dancing, the singing, the shechting of whatever they do there, right? So that attempt is what brings the place Kedusha on that time. Which is, I guess, what we try to do all the time in school, in shul, right? You bring people together at different times to do special things, to bring kavod shemayim.
I would end by saying, by the way, my brother always points out, my brother Adam, I'm a twin. Very, very well.
Happened to have been my roommate. Yeah,
He
whatever.
was your roommate, I forgot. So he always likes to point out, Reb Chaim of Volozhin, I think in the Nefesh HaChaim, writes that at any one given time, there's an opportunity for anybody to draw Kedusha. Depending on, the amount depends on how many others are trying. So we always used to learn Motzei Yom Kippur. Why? Because everyone's eating. People in Eretz Yisrael are sleeping. People in Chutz La'aretz are eating. So there's almost no one learning, so there's a greater piece of the pie. So I think Lag BaOmer has, the ability, a lot of Kedusha to draw from, and I think just the recognition today to take the time on the first Eretz side for ourselves, certainly learn together and to draw from that Kedusha, I think is just very meaningful and powerful today.
Yeah, and to take, also to, outside in the yeshiva here, so, everyone's having a nice masiba.
Plug for the yeshiva. Plug for the yeshiva.
Yeah. No, it's the idea that also the simcha of the day is there for us to access in some way. We should access times where there's simcha. Sometimes we access times where there's lack of simcha, and this is a great time for us to rejoice, for us to connect to each other, and to sing a little bit, and to enjoy.
And taking a moment, which I guess potentially could be, like you said before, more subdued or morose, and turn it into something of meaning. That's the goal of today, really. That's what we try to do here. So, Yeshikayach.
Yeah.
Beautiful to learn together and spend time together, and thank you all for joining. It's really special to have you all. Hopefully, Mirza Hashem, our learning today, and the words shared were Leilu Nishmasam for the Neshamos that were taken from us last year. And both the Young Israel West Hempstead and High School should hopefully continue to have Hatzlacha in giving a Kedusha to the Makom and Zman, hopefully time and place, God willing, at Biasko Al Tzedek, until we're Zocha to learn Nishalayim Yirah Kodesh, hopefully next year. That's a promise, right?
Yeah.
Quasi.
I just want to, before we close the live stream, but just to, in the Masorah of Rabbi Gottesman and Hakaras HaTov, so just to thank Avi Baruch and Matthew Zimmerman, who are here behind the live stream, as well as Miss Naomi Fredman, and also Miss Tzipora Zucker for helping behind the scenes to make all of this possible, and all the sponsors again, and everyone should have a Freilich and Lag BaOmer.
Freilich and Lag BaOmer. Good to see you all. Thank you for joining us. Leven einer Wein, weint jeder mit,